We learn the importance of creating meaningful assessments in learning activities that clearly align with measurable lesson and course level learning outcomes in our previous video, Designing Meaningful Assessments for Online Courses. If you need to review this topic before moving forward, please access the video link in the video descriptions area below. For career and technical educational courses, meaningful assessments are the best tools to measure student comprehension of concepts and skills. A meaningful assessment is one that properly measures students on the concepts specific to their lesson, allows for full student engagement by honoring student choice when possible, and also provides students with a clear understanding of how their learning will be assessed. Instructors can create authentic assessments by writing measurable student learning outcomes, or SLOs, aligning assessments and learning activities to those outcomes, and developing rubrics to help assess student performance. Once student learning outcomes have been decided on or provided by industry standards, assessments can be created that are clearly connected to and align with these learning goals. For many CTE instructors, the assessments are provided directly from industry or private partners, so there may not be a lot of opportunity to amend them to fit the needs of your students. If this is the case, consider using some of these recommendations for creating meaningful, formative assessments that can help you touch base with students throughout the course. Before designing assessments, it is important to identify the modality of your course. The modality will affect how you design your assessments and will dictate how much additional scaffolding or support resources your students will need to complete their tasks. A completely asynchronous online course will require much more scaffolding and student support than a blended or hybrid course that meets in person on a regular basis. Additionally, we know that as encouraging students to participate in active, relevant learning is tied to higher levels of comprehension and retention, it is best to have project-based, complex assessments rather than just rote tasks centered on memorization. For online CTE courses, active learning is often at the forefront of designing assessments, since the focus is often on measuring hands-on skills or applications. Before creating your assessment, it is important to ensure it is student-centered with an understanding of who your students are and what their specific needs may be. Consider surveying students at the beginning of the term to get a complete picture of who they are, where their skill levels are at, and where you may need to increase technical scaffolding if you're planning on asking them to interact heavily with the learning management system or additional platforms or tech tools. For example, if a nursing instructor teaching an online class wants students to download a particular program to complete a lab simulation assessment, it will be helpful to survey students to see if they are using a Google Chromebook, which would not support the required program. This would allow the instructor to have additional time to work with the student to find a convenient computer lab for them to complete their work. Understanding your audience and anticipating their needs is a fundamental step in creating an equitable experience for the students, as well as making sure minority students and students faced with disadvantages due to poverty, racism, and instructional barriers are being heard and supported to meet their goals. It is important to remember in online learning environments that students will have varying levels of expertise with technology, and that additional training, documentation, and resources may be needed for students at different skill levels. If your assessments require students to assess different platforms or complete tasks online, supply instructions on how to accomplish these things in addition to the assessment directions. Not doing so can increase student anxiety and lower the effectiveness of the assessment. Another way to create meaningful assessments for students is to highlight the relevance of the assessment to their future career goals. Consider designing an assessment that allows students to create a deliverable that can be displayed on their resume or personal portfolio. If possible, tie in any industry standards to the assessments that increase the emphasis on professional and occupational competencies. This real-world application encourages students to apply what they have learned and to devote considerable energy into something they feel has applicable value and relevance to their goals. Finally, as mentioned earlier in our series, an emphasis on student choice in summative and formative assessments where possible is a key UDL principle that will foster meaningful assessments that actually measure if students are mastering the content. By allowing student options in how they demonstrate their learning, students are able to focus on the concepts and not a format in which they may not have mastery. As the instructor, this is a good moment to consider your student learning outcomes and what it is you are trying to measure. If you are a culinary instructor and trying to assess if students understand how to formulate the correct ratio of yeast to water when baking a perfect loaf of bread, having them write a paper to demonstrate that knowledge would not be a good example of effective alignment. Rather, allow students the option to choose the medium in which they demonstrate that knowledge to you. Perhaps some students elect to create a podcast or audio recording where they verbally explain the concept, while other students are more comfortable with creating a video on how it works while they demonstrate the process. Either way, as long as the learning objective is being met and demonstrated in a measurable way, there is no need to force students into a medium they may cause unnecessary stress. Hands-on project-based learning is a central tenet in many CTE classes, and shifting these courses to a completely asynchronous online modality is extremely challenging. Some technologies are available to help replicate the classroom environment, such as lab simulations that are offered through many industry publications. If these are being used in your course, remember to provide the proper support and scaffoldings for students so that they are not overwhelmed by the technology. This may require you reaching out to the publisher for supporting materials, help desk information, and ADA remediation of their products if they are not accessible for students with disabilities. Additionally, if your online course requires students to go to campus to complete labs or assessments in person, consider allowing students to complete these tasks in larger blocks, so students have the option to complete several labs or assessments in one trip to reduce the necessity to come to campus repeatedly. Also, consider offering optional in-person lab times on campus for students that need the additional real-time support, as well as virtual office hours where you regularly are available for students to drop in virtually through your institution's conferencing software to ask questions or receive feedback. If your institution does not have conferencing software, many conferencing platforms have free versions that can be used for this purpose, or simply highlight that students are free to call your office at any point during these office hours if they are unable to access a computer. If you are a completely virtual instructor and do not wish to provide your private phone number, you can access a free platform like Google Voice to create a free number that will mask your personal one, so students can contact your personal phone while adhering to professional boundaries.